part of the reason for the taboo on psychedelics in the present society is because to experience these things is to practice democracy on a dangerous level. It's almost like free thinking carried to an unbearable level from the point of view of the state. The other night I was on mushrooms, and these things go on, which are, you say to yourself, that's a thought that I just had. But you have the feeling that everybody from Seattle to San Diego must have just hit the floor and said, my God, what was that? The notion that what you just witnessed went on between your ears seems preposterous, because the display of energy release is much greater than anything you as an individual will ever witness. I mean, they tell you atomic bombs are strong, they tell you all these things, but you will probably never witness a more energetic phenomenon than this thing which can go on with your eyes closed between your ears in a quiet room in the middle of the night. And I think that energy is our energy, the energy of the questing individual, and it's awesome. Awesome to the questing individual, awesome to any social organization that would like to row its boat without coming to terms with that. And this is why I think, at the close of the Neolithic, shamanism had to be bridled in. And over a period of 4 or 5 millennia, it was squeezed down to cult sites where a group of initiates dispensed a mystery seasonally, and in other words, there was a steady constriction of access to this kind of knowledge. And it's only really with the rise of a kind of crypto-anarchy like the United States, where so much freedom is allowed, that left to our own devices, and with the vast libraries we're able to pour through, some few of us come upon these things and exercise our right to explore it. But there are very few societies where this would be tolerated for a moment. It probably wouldn't be tolerated in this society if the high sheriffs had any notion what this energy is that we're actually tickling. So what I'm trying to say, and what I gathered from what I heard here, is there's a sense that it is important. And I share that sense. And one of the things I always puzzle over when I take it is, say, people have been doing this for 50,000 years, and yet they were never able to boot it out into the mainstream and make something out of it? Is it always to be simply a private, mind-boggling mystery? Isn't there some way that the affirmation and the information and the sense of unifying organic power that it carries could be surfaced and talked about? And I think that the answer is yes, but slowly. And the key is talked about. That what we're involved in here, and why Roy plays my tapes with such devotion, is we have to create a language that is a language specific to this thing, because using the language of yogic ecstasis or St. John of the Cross or the language of phenomenological psychology, it's not doing it for us. And my probes into description, if they obtain a resonance from people, it's because they sound like we're beginning to make a little bit of progress. The problem is, in order to make a little bit of progress, we have to say such outlandish things that it seems like we're making a complete break with reason. I mean, John mentioned this evening the extraterrestrials. I mean, what are we to make of these voices and presences and information dispensing hierophanies of occult knowledge that are contacted? This stuff has been psychopathy for 500 years in the definitions of Western civilization. So a radical restructuring of consciousness, and to me that means of language, is going to be necessary to let this in. And the conclusion I draw from the 60s, looking at what Leary said, and Hoffman and other people, was they always said what it made them think. Like Leary produced systems about the molecular memory, the this memory, the that memory. I've produced systems, and tomorrow I will expose some of you, the people who come to the afternoon session, to one of them. But I don't take them very seriously. They seem, because language itself is very mutable. You can say anything about the psychedelic experience, and if you say it well, people will say, yes, that's it. That's it. So, what is it aside from that? And that's what I want to try and get at, to build a consensus. And it's taken a long time for there to even be the notion of a need to build a consensus, because it's like trying to build a consensus about what is an orgasm, except we're building it with a much smaller sample of people who have ever had this experience, So we're trying to map an experience which some people have had a little bit of, some people have had a lot of, but everyone who's ever passed near it, by and large, is convinced that they know what it is. So a language has to be produced that is self-reflective of the experience. Now, how do we know when we've achieved that? Well, the only thing I can say about that is William Blake had an interesting rap, which was, he said, "The truth cannot be told so as to be understood without being believed." In other words, if you say the truth and someone understands what you're saying, they will automatically believe you. They will have no choice but to believe you, because to hear it and understand it is to believe it. And so it's that kind of talk going back and forth between us, the hearing that which you must believe because it is so obviously true, and then saying it back to other people, that will create a consensus. When I first began public speaking 2 or 3 years ago, my main concern was to call attention to this phenomenon of the superego, or the extraterrestrial, because I just thought that was the damnedest thing, I mean, I had taken LSD and all kinds of things and had a fair notion of how consciousness should map, and there just was no place in it for elves dispensing advice in rhyming couplets. And that I thought that I could tell people, if you take 5 grams of mushrooms in the dark, this will happen to you, and then they would do that, and then they would say, "You're right," and then somehow my work would be finished, because I would have pointed to a phenomenon, other people would have confirmed it, and then though the powers which explain these things would bend over it and figure it all out and take it away from you and me and go off and explain it back to us. And I've discovered that, as my friend Eric Jansch always insisted to me, that knowledge is metastable. You cannot really change the nature of knowledge, even if you're shouting from the rooftops. So now I have said this, many people have confirmed that it is so, and it don't mean shit, as far as I can tell, to the rest of the world. So I've become interested in something else, which is, what's it like to be people who know this in a world where everyone else thinks you're crazy? In other words, what is it like to cultivate a point of view about reality that is intolerably at odds with the larger ideological climate in which you're embedded? And I think it's a riot. I think maybe this is this is the real payoff on the psychedelic experience, is the permission to exemplify a kind of harmless madness, you know, and it gives us great happiness, which that was not what I set out for. What I set out for was to, as I used to say, open the door to hyperspace and let it all flow in. Well, maybe this is happening. Maybe we collectively are doing it, or that it will be done between now and the century's turn. But I think far more than I expected, the source of our own happiness as people lay very close to the surface in everything that we were doing. So I think, we all have traveled this path by different routes, and now we've arrived here. And this is, however turgid and obscure a view you may have from this high pinnacle, this is nevertheless someplace quite far along, I think. I think this is the path with heart. And I've, mostly by dumb luck, kept to it, and everyone that I have seen keep to it has been lifted up. But you have to make many discriminating judgments along the way and know actually what it is that you're after. And so it isn't, stimulation or depression or a fix. I don't think anybody here is neurotic. So we're not talking about psycholytic drugs or drugs which make your day-to-day life tolerable. I think probably all our day-to-day lives are tolerable. What we're talking about is actually chance-taking excursions into other dimensions. So it's more a warrior, or not, that has a bad taste. It's more an explorer kind of stance.